Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. King Tut's Alien Dagger. The tomb of Tutankhamun was uncovered in 1922. 3 years later, when archaeologists finally unwrapped his mummy, they discovered that he had been buried with an incredible dagger. It appeared to be made of iron and decorated with bits of gold. But things took a strange turn when researchers found the dagger to predate any Egyptian-made iron by about 2,000 years. King Tut ruled Egypt between 1332 and 1323 BC, but the material the dagger was made out of came from around 3000 BC. It wouldn't be until the 1970s that scientists were able to use advanced technology to look at what exactly the dagger was made out of. The first X-ray images showed the dagger to have high levels of nickel, something typically seen with extraterrestrial materials. They also realized the blade was way too sophisticated to be made from any ordinary iron. Researchers quickly started to understand that King Tut had been buried with a weapon made from a material not of this planet. In 2016, scientists were able to pinpoint where the material in the dagger came from. They traced the nickel, iron, and cobalt back to the Karga oasis. It likely came from a meteor shower that left bits of alien debris around the oasis. But how in the world did the Egyptians even know to make a space dagger? Did they know the material came from somewhere in the cosmos? Or maybe it wasn't even the Egyptians who built it? What if the dagger was given to the boy pharaoh as a gift from a visitor from another world? Probably not, but it's true that these space rocks would have been incredibly powerful and secret for ancient Egyptians, especially if someone saw it fall from the sky. Number 9. Egyptian mathematics. Ancient Egyptians were incredibly brilliant when it came to math. There is one surviving text that shows just how mathematically progressive the Egyptians were. It's called the Rind Papyrus, written around the year 1650 BC. It's unclear exactly where it came from, as it was purchased by a collector named Alexander Henry Rind in 1858 during a trip to Egypt. It's currently stored in the British Museum, but hasn't been traced back to any particular city or tomb. The Egyptians needed math for a lot of things. They used mathematics to track the movement of celestial objects and to create precise calendars. The Egyptian government also needed math to track taxes and to be successful in trade. Most of the time, there were professional scribes hired just to get the math done. What's interesting is that Egyptians may not have had abstract thoughts about numbers. For example, the number 7 would have been immediately thought of by an ancient Egyptian as a grouping of 7 objects instead of just a number. For the Egyptians, numbers had physical quantities attached to them. The Rind Papyrus shows Egyptians solved problems using arithmetic, fractions, division, and multiplication. But they didn't have any way that wasn't overly annoying to write a number above 1 million. Egyptians typically worked with small numbers, but they did it extremely well. Number 8. The Gateway to the Stars. Another thing Egyptians needed excellent math skills for was designing buildings. For example, the Pyramids of Giza. The pyramids were built in the early decades of the Old Kingdom, around the year 2500 BC. They didn't just use math to make the pyramids perfectly symmetrical, they also looked to the stars for positioning. Experts have been theorizing for years that the pyramids, the 3 major ones, were built in perfect alignment with the night sky. The idea is that ancient Egyptians had such advanced knowledge of the constellations that they built their structures to mimic what they saw above. Part of this is very true. The Egyptians did study the constellations, and they did watch the stars to make decisions about things like when to harvest. In the 1980s, researcher Robert Bauval noticed the similarities between the 3 pyramids of Giza and the 3 stars in Orion's belt. The theory that the constellation of Orion was used as a template for the pyramids became known as the Orion correlation theory. These days, it's considered a conspiracy theory. At the end of the day, nobody can say why the 3 pyramids were made to align with Orion's belt. Some say it's just a coincidence. Others say the pyramids were aligned to match with the sunset on the winter solstice. Researchers have spent decades trying to understand the mystery behind the positioning, but all anyone has today are theories. One thing's for sure is that the Egyptians did possess great knowledge of the stars. The outside universe impacted every aspect of Egyptian life. Keep in mind that the sky would have looked differently thousands of years ago, but let me know your theories in the comments below.
And now for number 7. But first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Jonathan Acosta and Svopmeister for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. We'd love to have you!
Number 7. The Ebers Papyrus. Go ahead and add medical knowledge to the long list of advanced wisdom possessed by the ancient Egyptians.
The Ebers Papyrus, written in about 1550 BC, is a preserved medical document. It's a collection of medical texts showing the unimaginable wealth of medicinal knowledge that the healers of the time had. Some have called it the most important medical papyrus in the world. Within the long lines of text, there are a lot of remedies for just about everything. You can learn how to treat a crocodile bite, what to do if you have toenail pain. There are sections on treating intestinal disease, and the author details diabetes and arthritis. It's also a guide on gynecology and dentistry. It talks about how to treat burns, hookworm, and bone fractures. Even the circulatory system is described in impossible detail, explaining the important role the heart plays in moving blood through blood vessels. The one thing that was really beyond their time more than anything was psychiatry. The Ebers Papyrus has an entire section on how to deal with depression, something that modern people didn't start taking seriously until very recently. The text is written on a long scroll about 60 feet in length, making it longer than any other medical papyrus from ancient Egypt. It's a perfect example of just how smart Egyptian people were in ways of medicine. The big question is, how did they figure all this stuff out? They even knew how to treat tumors and use birth control, and this was 3,500 years ago. Are you impressed? Number 6. Egg ovens. The Egyptians' greatest feat of engineering may not have been the pyramids, but rather egg ovens. Scientists are now arguing that the Egyptian egg ovens could be considered more amazing than the pyramids. Aristotle wrote that Egyptians produced poultry and geese with peculiar skill and in great numbers. What Aristotle was talking about were the Egyptian egg incubators. This was a fantastic system of heat, mud, and a lot of fertilized eggs. The Egyptians created an ingenious system of mud ovens that could replicate the condition of a brooding hen. A single set of ovens could hatch as many as 4,500 eggs in only 3 weeks. It was so impressive that foreigners who visited Europe were impressed up until pretty recently. In 1750, French entomologist René-Antoine Fairchalt was blown away by the egg ovens. René wrote that Egypt should be more proud of their egg ovens than of their pyramids. The simplicity of the Egyptian egg ovens is what makes them so special. It seems obvious, but for some reason nobody else figured out how to do it. That being said, this was nearer to the end of ancient Egypt. The egg incubators were a late invention. Salima Ikram, a professor of Egyptology in Cairo, said chickens didn't become a staple in Egypt until about 323 BC. But what do you think about this invention? Do you think it's more impressive than the pyramids? Let me know in the comments below.
Number 5. Egyptian metallurgy. The Egyptians learned how to work many metals from an early time. Starting around 5,000 years ago, ancient Egyptians were developing techniques for mining and refining natural mineral ores. As their civilization advanced, they learned how to make use of copper and bronze alloys, electrum, gold, silver, tin, and lead. They also had the engineering capabilities to transport extracted ore over massive distances, both over land and by sea. Another thing the Egyptians knew about was chemistry. They understood how to produce glass and porcelain in a variety of colors. They knew how to use natural earth salts to produce different results when working with various metals. The metallurgy of ancient Egypt was a huge part of their success. They could even produce metallic wires and threads made from gold and silver. In the tomb of Thutmose III, who died in 1436 BC, researchers found mysterious silver wires with no obvious purpose. The most mysterious part of Egyptian metallurgy is that they always seem to have had the ability to work with metals. Ever since they suddenly appeared along the Nile, the Egyptians worked natural materials with unprecedented skill. They hardened copper using arsenic, they manufactured bronze, They understood the deeper properties of metals in a way that seemed far too complicated for ancient people 5,000 years ago. Number 4. The Forbidden Tablet. In 1828, a Dutch museum acquired a very interesting artifact. That artifact is currently held at the Leiden Museum of Antiquities in the Netherlands, and nobody knows what it does. Or rather, I should say, nobody knows what it did, seeing as it definitely doesn't do anything now. It's a fairly large artifact in the shape of a disc. It looks like a circular tablet, perhaps a map or a schematic board. The object is covered in hieroglyphics, and surprisingly, it's still in very good shape. Specialists validated the artifact, confirming it to be from 4,500 years ago. But as is the problem with so many Egyptian antiquities, nobody knows where it was found. It was most likely looted, then gradually made its way to Europe through the black market. The reliefs on the object are totally undecipherable. Specialists and scholars have tried their hardest, but have never been able to decode the hieroglyphics on the object. Many have noted how it looks kind of similar to a control table seen in a modern airplane. It's also made of solid alabaster. This is important to know because in Egypt, alabaster was primarily used for decorating coffins. The Egyptian tablet is a huge mystery, undoubtedly with secrets scientists may never unlock. Many have suggested the tablet is a reproduction of a different artifact, one that was far more advanced. The idea is that ancient Egyptians witnessed a piece of extraterrestrial technology and recreated it in alabaster, then could never figure out how to make it work. Number 3. Cut in stone. Up until the 7th century BC, Egyptians weren't particularly fond of iron as a metal. Yes, they had excellent skills when it came to working with metal, but iron was often seen as impure. The Egyptians associated it with Seth, who was a spirit of evil. Egyptians used other metals instead up until the Assyrian invasion, which made iron more mainstream. The reason this is important is that prior to the 7th century BC, some of the greatest monuments in Egypt were built. Stone sculptures and, of course, the pyramids. The Egyptians created these massive constructs out of basalt, quartzite, diorite, granite, and other hard stones. Stones that can't typically be shaped without using iron tools. The Egyptians had bronze tools, but bronze is not ideal when working with very hard metals. If bronze couldn't hack it and the Egyptians didn't like iron because they thought it was from an evil spirit, how did they work the stone? That is an impossible question. Researcher Chris Dunn made some interesting observations while investigating the unfinished obelisk, a 12,000-pound monument commissioned in 1478 BC but never completed. He noticed tool marks on the stone that appeared to be made from a modern machine. The cut marks along the enormous obelisk look like what you would expect from a modern machine, but obviously Egyptians didn't have access to anything except bronze hand tools. The opinion of some is that the Egyptians had access to a few pieces of advanced technology. This technology was used to cut granite and drill through solid rock. But then, at some point, the Egyptians lost it. Where they got the technology in the first place, now that's something that would definitely be worth knowing. Number 2. The sistrum. The sistrum is an interesting musical instrument that dates back thousands of years. It was a sacred instrument in ancient Egypt, used to produce unusual melodies during religious ceremonies. But the sistrum was more than just a glorified tambourine. It was an instrument used by the gods. Because archaeologists have found countless images of gods wielding these percussion instruments, we know they had great spiritual importance. But the most interesting part is that the image of the sistrum has been found near false doors throughout Egyptian ruins. The artifact is synonymous with Egyptian gods and portals. The history of the instrument isn't well known. The earliest images of the sistrum show it in the hands of Isis and Bastet, but also Hathor. Hathor was known for being a deity of the stars, a kind of representative of the cosmos. If there was a tool used for opening portals, the goddess Hathor would have been the one to wield it. Later on in Egyptian history, the sistrum became used in rituals. It would be played in ceremonies meant to placate the Nile River and keep it from overflowing. People believed the instrument had the power to prevent disaster and control the weather. But what if this instrument was, long ago, a key used by the old gods? A key that could open portals, allowing the gods to step through to other worlds. Then, when the gods were gone and the doors were dead, maybe the Egyptians made imitations of the gods' keys and turned them into musical instruments. But that's only a theory. Number 1. Egyptian inks. Egyptian ink was another fantastic technology way ahead of its time. A Danish team of scientists recently studied 12 fragments from an ancient piece of Egyptian papyrus from about 2,000 years ago. Though keep in mind, Egyptian ink was originally developed about 5,200 years ago. The team of scientists looked at the molecular and structural composition of the ink. They found that the red ink, which was used primarily for headings and highlighting important text, was full of lead. Lead compounds were also found in the black ink, which was used for the primary body of the text. Lead was added to ink so that it wouldn't smear or smudge while scribes were completing manuscripts. In other words, it was fast-drying ink, something that wasn't seen in Europe until the 15th century. Egyptians made their ink from organic material like gum, processed into pellets. Then, when a scribe wanted to write something, they would place the pellet in water, and it dissolved into ink. Thanks for watching! How do you think the Egyptians were able to develop such advanced technologies? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and come back soon. Bye!